What's up, Internet? You're tuning in to episode 26 of the Steam Deck Podcast, Flipscreen Games weekly podcast, all about Valve's hot new handheld, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. Welcome back to another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. Are you excited to get into it?
Yes, I am, as always.
Of course. Who wouldn't be? But especially with this topic, I know this is one that you've been excited to get into for a bit. This week on the show, we're going to talk a little bit about the February Next Fest. But the main topic we're going to kick things off with is all about the year of Linux gaming that might be upon us very soon. Of course, the SteamOS 3 public release is supposed to happen later this year. And we've been talking a lot about what that could mean for PC gaming and, you know, Microsoft's kind of stranglehold on it with Windows.
Yeah, so I've got a particular interest in it. So I haven't had a gaming PC for a long time. I've been a Mac user most of my life. So gaming on a computer has kind of been out of reach for me for a long time, especially once they switched to 64-bit only, and then over to Apple's own silicon. It was like, I can't play video games there anymore because half of the ones you buy on Steam are just not even playable. But the Linux gaming stuff kind of surprised me. It wasn't ever something I properly looked into. But having played with SteamOS on the Steam Deck, it's pretty clear that Proton really makes it a viable alternative to Windows. And I do wonder, with SteamOS 3's public release later this year, as you've said, alongside Ionia working on a Linux-based OS for their own handhelds, whether this is the year when people start to consider Linux as a truly viable alternative to Windows. I know a bunch of enthusiasts already play games on Linux quite successfully, obviously. SteamOS is built on top of Arch Linux, but I don't think it's the mainstream at the moment. And I hope that we potentially get to the point this year where people start talking about it as an option, as like, oh, I'm using Linux as my main install now.
So what do you see as the barriers between that and like where we're at right now?
So I think I think there's a few barriers, right? So there's barriers in terms of gaming that we need to break down and look at. But there's also barriers in terms of just like your PC is not only a place for gaming for a lot of people. I know for you, for example, you use your PC as like a workstation for work, for video editing. There's a lot of viable alternatives. I think web-based software has really come a long way with like Office 365 or with Google Docs, Notion, things like that. You can do a lot of stuff web-based. Figma, GIMP is a great alternative to Photoshop. We've got DaVinci Resolve as an alternative to stuff like Adobe Premiere. There are alternatives, but I think a lot of people, there's going to be that one piece of software that stops them switching full time for a while. And until things like that pick up, I think that stops people kind of coming over. And that's not even considering some of the gaming stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the big barrier for me to even like consider it, is that it feels like it would be a hassle to like switch over all the programs I'm using and all this stuff just so I can be on Linux instead of Windows. But I know one of the other things
I felt like that with gaming at one point, right? I felt, well, all of these developers are going to have to come in and rebuild their games for Linux and republish them, and the selection of games is going to be a while. I think Valve had that like Steam Play thing for a while, that Steam Play program where they had Linux builds of games that were specifically built for SteamOS, and that's back when they were doing Steam machines. And it feels like we've been on this trail with them for a while. Obviously, this is the third iteration of SteamOS at this point. Steam machines are like a thing of the past. But it kind of feels like now is the time for them to really make this play. Not only have they got the Steam Deck, but they've also got the option to chuck this onto third-party devices as well.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what that landscape looks like as it continues to evolve, and as like like you mentioned Ionio and some of the other folks that are kind of getting in the space and trying to have their own handheld computer, but it's also a gaming device competitor, right? Like it seems to be an emerging market. But it'll be interesting to see because
Yeah, like I think it was all kind of kicked off with the GPD win and like their line of products and handhelds, and obviously that runs Windows. But I think
it kind of goes
Windows
even
is just
further back though too, with like Nvidia and the Shield and everything, right? Like that was kind of like
yeah. I mean that was not x86 focused. That was like an ARM based system,
right.
running on Android. But like the x86 stuff, like the GPD wins and the Ionios and things that have all run on Windows. It wasn't until the Steam Deck came out and kind of just, I think, showed people that you could have Linux as
Yeah.
the only option on the device.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, it's funny because I think prior to the Steam Deck, like it felt like Android was the way to go, right? Like that was what people were trying with a lot of that stuff, and thinking how can we make that architecture work? And it's interesting to see like how much it feels like Valve has evolved Linux based gaming in a pretty short amount of time, but it'll be interesting because like they have the ability to create that layer with Proton that does a lot of that work. I wonder how likely it is that they could do that with other software, like you talked about, the Creative Suite stuff, and find a way to make Windows programs, viable across the board. Doesn't seem like it's impossible, but to zero back in on the gaming thing, something I know you've talked about a lot is the easy anti-cheat support, and that's something that they'll need to figure out because that presently kind of makes a lot of games not playable on Linux.
Yeah, and like easy anti-cheat is one of the anti-cheat options, and it's like probably the most popular. And we need that for multiplayer games, but there's like so many multiplayer games missing, right? You can't play Destiny 2, you can't play Genshin Impact. I think the Master Chief Collection only recently got patched, so you could play some of the single player, but not the
I
multiplayer
would
because of anti-cheat.
imagine you can't play any of Riot's games either because they have, I think it's Riot Vanguard is their anti-cheat, which I don't believe
And I'd
supports
imagine
Linux.
that's like a Windows piece of software. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the problem. Like Proton has an easy anti-cheat runtime, but a lot of the games aren't patched to look for it, and so they're looking, or they've got a DLL in the wrong place, things like that. Like Fall Guys, for example, if you download it from the Epic Game Store now, which is the only place you can get it from because it's been delisted from Steam, you have to move files around still in order to get it to work. And every time you update, you potentially have to move those files again. And it just becomes a whole hassle to keep a free to play game just still running. Whereas we need that to be an option right at the beginning. It's just like download the easy anti-cheat runtime, it plays the game. The consumer doesn't even think about it, doesn't even know about it. But there's other stuff that breaks it, right? We've seen this week with Ubisoft stuff. Just completely breaking with like their Uplay overlay is just a pain in the ass, an absolute pain in the ass. We had a similar problem with EA when they updated from the EA Origins app over to like the new EA app, and it booted that up as like a launcher, but that launcher was broken, and it feels like we got to get away from launchers. At least in my eyes, they're just like a waste of time. If you're selling a game on Steam, it should launch from Steam. It shouldn't rely on a launcher. It shouldn't rely on your Ubisoft Connect overlay or any of this stuff that you got to get out of the way. It should just run. And there's no reason I think it shouldn't run.
Yeah, and I guess the question is like, what does it take for that to become the case, right? Is that like a solution that Valve has on the software side, or is it something where you need to get the developers of the world, the publishers of the world, to buy in on the idea that Linux is now a viable
I think it's
alternative?
that side. Yeah, I do. I think it's that side of the fence because we've seen from Valve's side that they'll put the work in. These problems, these problems come up, they fix them, they do hot fixes, they do patches, and they're solved within a couple of days. But if you've been excited to play a game, you've like bought a game, you've downloaded it, or say you're on a trip, right? And it breaks, massive pain in the ass. Whereas I think if, like Ubisoft, for example, is a really great example because they removed all of their games from Steam, or they stopped publishing on Steam, and they've only recently started again. with The Division and with Watch Dogs Legion coming to Steam for the first time. I would imagine Far Cry is probably on the way, Far Cry 6 and Far Cry 5. They publish them exclusively through their Ubisoft Connect app and their Ubisoft store. And I don't know what kind of changed. Obviously, Ubisoft's in a bit of turmoil, a bit of trouble in terms of financials, in terms of what's going on in-house. And we've seen, like, we discussed that at length on the Flip Screen Games podcast. But it seems like maybe they've considered, oh, there's potentially an audience and a market of 1 million people that have all bought a Steam Deck, and we can sell them a game now. And yeah, 70% of something is better than 0% of something. And I think not being on Steam is really detrimental to a lot of publishers. Like playing Blizzard games, a massive pain. We had Max talking about that on a recent episode about how he was trying to get Overwatch to work, and it was a huge pain, and he had to wait for it to be patched, and he had to go through all of these hoops to install through Lutris to get their launcher to work, and you've got to like spend all of this time and all of this effort in something that should be a one-click process. And whether that's something that Valve needs to consider and allow these people to have their launchers on Steam to make it simpler, or have native support for third-party stores. I don't know if they're willing to have that, because that kind of negates the purpose of Steam in the first place. They lose out on their 30%. That's the reason they made the Steam Deck. They want more people to buy in on their marketplace. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is there, but it seems like we probably need Linux versions of these launchers at the very least from these developers.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the problem, right? Because I think they're not going to do that. Because like you said, like Linux is niche, like it's not a significant SKU, and it could be, but I think the idea of them coming through to support it natively is probably a ways off, right? Like I think Valve is going to have to do a lot more work to evangelize and legitimize the SteamOS 3 public release to prove to those players that I shouldn't say players, that implies the gamers, I mean the publishers, right? The powers that be, to convince them that like they're leaving money on the table by not supporting Linux. And I think that's going to be the thing that's going to make them do that. Not just because, this like problem is affecting a, probably statistically insignificant number of Steam users who want to play on the deck and whatever. Like there's going to have to be more in the wild before they're really going to be like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, we'll spend the R&D to develop a new Linux-based launcher for a fraction of an audience that we don't even really want to support anyway, right? Because ideally, I'm sure they would love everyone to just have their launcher and buy through their things. They put the stuff on Steam because they feel like they have to.
Yeah. Well, they have to because no one was buying it. Like Ubisoft came back for a reason. If people were buying their games, they wouldn't have come back because they wouldn't have needed to. But I think Valve maybe needs to put their foot down a little bit and be like, no, you're not going to launch your own launcher to then launch a game if you bought it from Steam. Because I think that's where a lot of the problem comes from. That's where the problem with the Ubisoft stuff came from. That's where the problem with the EA stuff come from. Paradox Games, which are the creators of Prison Architect and a bunch of other games, updated their launcher this week. And apparently, you can't now launch their games unless you switch to desktop mode and manually delete the launcher. Like, it's ridiculous. You shouldn't need to do that. It should download the game and it should just play the game, rather than you having to download it and then going over to desktop mode, tinkering, tweaking it, and then playing it. I bought the game on Steam. It was verified on Steam as working, and then the developer did something to break the game. And that shouldn't be possible, especially for a game that's gone through the validation process that supports Steam.
Yeah.
Unless there is an option that we can go back and choose an older version that works of the game, that shouldn't be something that can happen.
Yeah, and I think it's frustrating that Valve allows that to happen. It very much feels like an example of their kind of laissez-faire approach feeling bad for consumers, right? Because it's like, why am I being punished for the fact that you didn't want to that you wanted to play ball with them, right? Like you allowed them to launch it in this kind of weird like hybrid way, and that's negatively impacting my ability to play the game that I paid for, right? At the very least, like I think if they're going to be pushing those, that as the solution, and they're not gonna play hardball and force these companies to kind of be more traditional with their Steam releases, then like I don't know, I feel like you should be more transparent about that on the page, right? Like especially on Steam Deck, where
Yeah,
they
because
have
you
a
can
whole
see on some of them,
section.
like they do have a section on some games that's like, oh, this includes like de novo DRM and stuff like that, or like it contains easy anti-cheat. It should say something like launches the EA Play
Requires the
launcher, or
launching of this, yeah.
yeah,
And again, right? Like if you're telling me that it's like Steam Deck verified, but then like there's a problem when I try to launch it on the Steam Deck, is like that's bullshit. Like, like I wouldn't have bought
yeah.
a game that I thought wouldn't run if I knew that was a problem, right? Or like,
And that's the difference between Steam and other platforms like PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo, which I think they're the traditional consoles. I think people do see Steam Deck as a console, even though it is a PC. They go through a vetting process and an approval process, and I don't necessarily want that extensive of an approval process. But I feel like if your game has been Steam Deck verified, Valve should, at the very least, when you submit an update, check that the game can launch. Like, still, like that's a tiny little thing that they need to do. It's just like before it gets approved, to go on the store, because I'm sure there's like checks and balances that they go through. Like, oh, is there anything like defamatory or whatever, or like a profanity in like the description or something that shouldn't be there on the storefront? Just do one check of like, okay, let me install this on a Steam Deck, and then let me see if this launches. And if it doesn't, I can go back to the developer and say, hey, just so you're aware, we're now going to mark this as it doesn't work on Steam Deck and it's unsupported, and we're not going to push that update out to Steam Deck players because it's going to break their device. Or give me the option, to install the update as a player myself. If I want to try the update, or I've checked on ProtonDB to confirm that it's been approved and validated, rather than automatically downloading the update and forcing me to when I play the game, give me the choice. Tell me what's changed before I play it. Tell me if it is no longer compatible, or give like a review system. Like, let me know that it is playable.
yeah, and don't push an update out that breaks a game I've already paid for and put enough time into that I can't return.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think I think if they can sort things like that out, and they can make those concessions where it's just like it is a case of I download the game and I launch it and I play, and it plays just like it does on Windows, or even better in some instances. I think that is when Linux gaming can become more mainstream. Ionia has confirmed that their Linux OS is coming out in 2023, and it's a true competitor to SteamOS, to the point where we should be able to have an Ionia installer and install that onto the Steam Deck as well, or we can install it onto like a GPD device or a 1X player device. They seem to be wanting to have control of the operating system. That makes sense. I think that's ultimately where a lot of these device manufacturers are going to want to get to. We saw that when Android became a thing, right? It was every single device had like a different skin, a different differentiation. That was how they set themselves apart. I could see the operating system becoming the differentiator between devices. Like, oh, this one it only runs on Windows, but this one comes with SteamOS, or this one comes with Ionia OS, and it's like up to the consumer what operating system they want to install on their device, if they want to go down that route manually, or which device they want to purchase based on what operating system it runs, which I think is quite exciting.
And I guess the other kind of wrinkle there is, what does that mean for for other storefronts, right? And like we talked about like the third party launcher support, but you think about stuff like obviously Epic is probably the big example, but like I mean you've also got like stuff like GOG and like the Humble store and stuff like that. And like, do you see those folks seeing that Linux is an emerging market, or that like it's that's a significant future segment of PC gaming, and do you see those people play ball as well? Because I think that is going to be the other thing, right? Is granted there are a lot of folks that are like, I only play games on Steam, and like that's where my library is, and I'm not going to mess with other launchers at all. And I guess for that user it doesn't really matter, but I think for Linux to become like a really viable alternative to Windows. In addition to the non-gaming stuff we talked about, that's kind of the other thing, right? Is like, am I limited? You know, if I don't use Windows, if I don't use Windows and I decide to go for Linux, does that mean I'm now locked in and I can only play stuff on Steam and I can only use those storefronts? And will that influence people's willingness to do that?
We've got stuff like we've got stuff like Heroic and Lutris, which goes a long way in allowing you to use those other storefronts. But it shouldn't be down to the open source community to do that. Yes, I would still want those open source launchers to exist, because I think they are in some ways way better than what Epic Games and what other platforms can offer. But I would love to have just a native way to download games from the Epic Games Store and run them with Proton or with Wine on my Linux PC or my Steam Deck. And I don't know why that's taken them so long. Maybe it's because it's got their competitor's name on it. It's the Steam Deck, and they consider like SteamOS and like that being the focus of Linux gaming at the moment. Maybe it takes something like Ionia OS, or maybe they work on their own one. You know, I could easily see Epic coming out with their own kind of handheld, or then partnering with someone like Ionio and having their store as like the main focus, and it being like an Epic Games focused device as they kind of as more and more of these devices come out. I don't know what the kind of route that they want to go down is, but I do think that third-party launchers need to either disappear, which I don't want to happen, because I don't want Steam to be the monopoly and the only place that you can buy games from. I do think it's the best place at the moment to buy PC games, but I don't want it to be the only place. I think competition leads to things like the Steam Deck even existing, or leads to things like SteamOS existing, because Valve saw that they were locked in with Windows and they were reliant on Microsoft and reliant on one of their competitors, essentially, in order to run their games and run their business, and they wanted to divest from that, and that, I think, is why we even got SteamOS in the first place, is why Steam machines existed, and without Steam machines we wouldn't have got the Steam Deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether or not Valve looks at Epic as their number one competitor, Epic definitely looks at Steam as its number one competitor, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're probably right there. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this part of the conversation for today. If you want to write in with your thoughts on the future of Linux gaming this year and beyond, make sure you hit us up at flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can find links to all the places you can find us all over the web. I would love to hear from some of you Linux gamers out in the audience about how you feel about the future of the platform and where you think things are going to go. So remember, flipscreen.games, that's the website. You can find links to all the places you can find us all over the web. You can become a Patreon producer. You can write into the show, to our email address, join our Discord, however you choose to get involved. We greatly appreciate you. Speaking of appreciating you, I want to extend some appreciation to our Patreon producers for the month of February. They are, of course, Anthony Gonzalez, Christian Oliveria, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Asobi, Mary Berry, Ty the Dude, Wakahula, and Zaid Ida. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. Y'all are the real, so the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. So let's get into some game talk, because the February Next Fest is happening right now for a few more days as of by the time you're listening to this. So from the 6th until the 13th, there are dozens of demos over on Steam right now for a bunch of hot upcoming games, some of which we've talked about in the past quite a bit, that are now like imminent for the first time. So I highlighted a few games that I was excited about and wanted to chat about a bit. Steve, if you have any that you want to add, please do as we go here. But the first one I wanted to talk about was Darkest Dungeon 2. So this is a game, it's been in development for a while, sequel to a really, really popular indie game, Darkest Dungeon, from a couple years ago. I was a big fan of the original, played it on PC. It eventually came to Switch, I think, and I think it's like going to be right at home on the Steam Deck. It's a roguelike where you basically like, you have like a home base that you're building out, and like that's kind of the roguelike part of it. and you're like constantly adding new like units to your arsenal, and you'll get like all these different like types of archetypes of characters, like a warrior or a rogue or like a necromancer or whatever, and they have all these different abilities, and you go through it's like a dungeon crawling situation, right? And you'll have different kind of random events happen. You might find a weapon, you might have a battle encounter, right? You might trigger a trap, and as you go, you start taking like damage, and that like dictates how long your run will go, because like the characters in your group can die, right, in combat, but the other big thing is they can go insane, right, because like they're experiencing all these like dark,
Yeah, that's cool.
like Lovecraftian horror type situations. So like you might run into this crazy fucked up monster, and then like that messes up the sanity of one of your your party members, and then like they can lose their mind and like go crazy and like start attacking you and all this different stuff. It's just a really, really good game. It's a really well made game, and I think it brings together a lot of interesting different kinds of gameplay elements and marries them in a way that makes for like a really satisfying loop. This is one to look out for. If you never got around to the first one, definitely keep your eyes out on this. If anything I said piqued your interest, because I think it was definitely one of the better indie games the year it came out.
Is it worth going back and playing the first one while people wait for the sequel, do you think?
I would say yes, like broadly. I think it's worth doing. I think like I said, I think it's a really good game, but I also think that like with the sequel around the corner, like, you might just wait and jump into this new one, because it's not like there's like a story or anything like that you need to keep up with. But yeah, I mean, you can get the first one on sale very frequently at a great price. So yeah, I highly recommend the original. But if you're like locked in on the second one, maybe you hold off and wait for that. But definitely worth your time either way. So the next one on the list is one I'm interested to talk about, because I feel like you and I have been talking about this game like since we met. MINEKO'S Night Market.
Yeah, it has been that. Yeah.
It was announced years ago, right? When we were at our old outlet. Was supposed to come out in 2019. Was then I think supposed to come out again and got delayed. It's currently listed as coming soon on Steam. We still don't have a release date in mind, but you can go and play it and actually get hands on it now. Here on that Steam Next Fest. So like where are you at with this game, Steve? Are you still excited for it?
I think I was really excited about it when we first saw it because it was pre-Animal Crossing.
Sure.
I kind of feel like a lot of that. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of that got resolved for me with Animal Crossing, but I still am so in love with the art style. I'm so in love with like narrative-driven games. I know that it's not quite like Animal Crossing because there is a story to it, and there is still things that are similar, like you're going to a market and things like that. But I'm going to install the demo. Looking forward to playing it. I think it's definitely worth a look.
Yeah, I like how cat centric it is. That's something that's always appealed to me.
Yeah. There's like a game I've been meaning to check out on Steam. It's been on my wish list forever, which is you run a cat cafe. That's really cool.
Okay.
It like merges two of my favorite things, like tycoon-y style games with cats. So
yeah, I thought you were gonna say cats and cafes. I'm like, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the style of this one definitely speaks to me. I think it's got a really, really cute style, and I don't know. I got to be honest with you. The last couple of years, I've been kind of like feeling a little burnt out on like the like loose no story. Like it's a management farming kind of. It's like I just feel like there's been so many games in that genre recently, and like between the Stardew Valleys and the Animal Crossings and these big experiences that we've had, I don't feel like I'm jonesing for that really the way that I was a couple of years ago. Whereas like this being a story-driven thing and being like more narrative-focused, I could see that being appealing to me, because it's focused and it's less like just play until you're bored,
Yeah, and I've got one on my list, Pixel Shy, which we'll get to, which is very much that.
Uh-huh.
It's that play until you're bored kind of thing. It looks very much inspired by Stardew Valley. It's like a RPG sandbox with like life sim stuff. So I don't know if there's much of a story to that, or if it is very much just like it's another Stardew Valley. But it was in the Wholesome Direct. I remember seeing it there. And it's been on my wish list. I'm looking forward to checking that one out. So I'm gonna install a bunch of these when we're done recording.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm looking at some of the B-roll for this one, and there's like a little like mini game where you're like freeing cats and stuff like that. Like, it just seems like it's a different kind of game. Like it has elements that feel familiar in that space, but that are different than a lot of the games we've played in recent memory. So I'm hoping that this game can still come out and kind of carve a niche for itself, because it's one that I've been interested in for a long time, but I hope that the long development cycle hasn't kind of put it in a position where people are just not as excited about it anymore. You can definitely see too much of a game. So then speaking of, the next one I wanted to chat about was the System Shock reboot, remake. Well, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. So this game's been bopping around for like a couple years, right? Like, it was originally announced in 2015. They had a successful Kickstarter in 2016. They restarted development in 2018, and then it was supposed to come out in 2021, and then it's been delayed 2 more times since then, right? So this is an interesting one, right? Because like I have not super known what to expect from it, considering it's had a bit of a tortured development. But I mean, it seems like it's coming along.
Did it change developers at some point, or
no? They did when they restarted development. There were some senior folks who were involved that were kicked out. I think there was a controversy around one of the people. I think it was like one of the original creatives that had come back. I think he got publicly called out for like some misconduct stuff, and I think he got shuffled off. But it's been the same studio. Their kind of claim to fame is doing like getting old games where the rights have lapsed and then re-releasing them in like these fresh versions.
Well,
like,
that's Night Dive's deal, right?
Right, and they're the developer.
They've been like a bit of a mixed bag. I know. I didn't know if it changed developers over to them, if because it looked like it was originally developed by Looking Glass, but I don't know if I think that's the original game.
Yeah, I think that's the original System Shock was made by them, and Looking Glass was dissolved a few years later.
I'm looking. I'm gonna give it a try because I've always wanted to play System Shock.
Yeah,
I love the BioShock games. I'd be interested to see where it came from. I love Prey, which is a Shock game. So I do like this style of game, and like a System Shock, the original, it's just too old for me. I don't have any nostalgia for it. And you look at it, it's like playing Doom, the original Doom. So I would like to play a new take on it. Night Dive's a bit of a mixed bag for me. They kind of really mishandled the remaster of the Blade Runner game. Looked terrible. They used like AI upscaling and things, which just looked awful. They forgot to credit people that provided like the community provided subtitles for them, and they just didn't credit them. They had to like be credited after the fact. They did a lot of stuff that I wasn't particularly a big fan of with that one, but they have done some really great remasters in the past as well. So I'm sure they'll do a good job with this. I think this is probably their first new game, right?
So looking
previously, it's all been like re-releases.
So they have 2 other games that they published, but they didn't develop. So in 2015, they published Spirits of Xanadu, which was worked on by Good Morning and Commander, and then they published Womb Room in 2016 from Bearded Eye. This is their first Night Dive developed game. But then they have done a bunch of the remastered and enhanced ports. Like in 2015, they did System Shock Enhanced Edition, which is like the enhanced version of the original game. They worked on the Turok ports that got done in 2015 and 17. They did the Doom 64.
Yeah, they did like the Quake stuff as well.
Yeah, the Quake
Xbox,
port.
I remember that.
System Shock 2 Enhanced Edition is like coming from them as well. So yeah, they've this seems to be their first like major outing, where they're not just kind of like polishing off an old game and re-releasing it.
Interesting. Be interested to see what happens with it then.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. Because it is very much like, it feels like a question mark. Like it looks good, and I've heard that the demo has been solid, but yeah, it definitely feels like it's I guess I'm not sure what to make of it yet, but it's supposed to come out in March, so it's supposed to be imminent at this point. So, and obviously you can go grab the demo now and check it out and get a sense for it. So I think this is one I'd like to kick the tires on and see if it does anything for me. Because just like you, I'm a big fan of BioShock, and I've always wanted to kind of see that, the lineage, where it comes from, but never got around to it.
I never have, yeah.
So we'll see. It's one to keep an eye on. I think I'm certainly not. I don't know that it's one you can take to the bank yet, but I think definitely one that's going to be interesting to try and see what people's reaction is. So then the next one is Planet of Lana. This is one we've seen in the past. I can't remember if it was at a Nintendo event or what, but I remember it catching my eye previously. It's an indie from a Swedish studio named Wishfully, and originally got announced in 2021, and it's like a platformer where you play this character Lana, and she has this little like black monster creature animal that's like her pet companion, and you're on this mission to like find her sister on like a planet that they're living on that like seems to be in the throes of like a War of the Worlds type situation, where there's like these UFOs that have like come down and are attacking everybody. It's one that like the style of it really caught my attention when we first saw it. I think it has a really nice art style. I love a cute monster animal companion, whatever. It's just one that caught my attention, and I'm excited to kind of see if it comes together as well as I think it might.
Yeah, it feels like it'd be right at home on Steam Deck as well. This was shown at an Xbox event. It's console exclusive to Xbox. I think we saw it last year. It was playable at Gamescom. So I guess it's probably a similar demo to the one that was at Gamescom that's now in Next Fest. But it seems like it's really coming along and is due out in spring, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, does this one do anything for you?
No, not really. No, unfortunately not. It reminds me of one I reviewed when we were at Loot Pots, which I can't remember the name of. Let me find out. Which was another Planet game, Planet Alpha, which was a game from I can't remember who, but yeah, it was similar in style. It's like a side-scrolling platformer kind of thing with a story-driven, focused on like with some like environmental puzzles, that kind of thing. It was from Team 17.
Kind of reminds me of like Limbo, but like less spooky.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely interesting to me. I think the art style really caught my attention, and I like the idea of kind of like a 2D platformer telling like an environmental story. Like I don't know. It seems different, and I don't know if it's one that is going to necessarily knock my socks off, but it definitely has some personality to it that I'm finding very interesting. That's for sure. So speaking of interesting art styles, this next one that I wanted to highlight, it's called Shadows of Doubt. It is a stealth detective game set in a science fiction noir city. It's got a like very like neon, like retro future kind of vibe, which is very much my aesthetic for sure. And you're a private investigator who is trying to like solve the main mystery is about a serial killer, but then there's like these other smaller stories that you'll take on jobs to like keep yourself in business while you're solving the broader plot and everything. It's got a like a voxel kind of like style
Yeah.
to
I
the
was gonna
overall
say it's
world.
voxels, yeah.
It's like got a almost
Looks
like
phenomenal.
yeah, it's got like almost like a Minecraft look to it. But then the actual characters themselves are like more. They're still voxel, but they feel a little flatter. You know, it's very interesting.
Oh, the guy himself, the character you play seems to be like fully voxel based. It's very interesting. I'm looking forward to trying this one out. I love detective games. I love like neon noir style. I think they look really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I actually think this is really cool, and it seems like you actually have to collect evidence and go on leads and things like that, and like you pick locks and do all sorts of cool stuff. So, yeah, this one's very much on my wish list, and I'm gonna check this one out before next fest is over.
yeah. I figured you would. This was one as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, this feels like a Steve game. You love solving a mystery and doing environmental puzzles.
Yes, that is true.
It's funny, yeah. I don't love that stuff as much, but the style of this is like I just think really cool. You know, like it's got a really I think a phenomenal look to it. You know, and like you don't get a lot of like fully realized like voxel style games. You know, it feels super unique. And yeah, just like there's just a scene that was showing up of you punching a guy. Like the level of detail on the voxel models is weird too. I think because like you're used to it being a little squarer, right, with like something like Minecraft, and like the definition in the face and everything is a little.
Yeah,
It's
cool.
very different. Yeah, I'm excited about that one. You'll have to let me know how the demo is. I don't know that I'll get around to it, but definitely one I'm keeping on my radar. So this next one caught my attention as well, and it's like a story driven, like choose your own adventure, cozy indie. Maybe it's a sad boy game. I'm not quite sure like what the tone of it is, but the style of it definitely caught my attention. It's from Laura Shigihara, who is an indie dev who worked on a game called Rakuin, which was like a pixel art RPG that got some attention. And this is a game where you play like a white collar office worker who works for this like really like shitty company, you know, and he ends up in the hospital and like meets this child who like draws a picture of him, and he ends up in this like fantastical world. And I don't know. It just seems interesting. You know, it's like I like these games. Like I like weird indie games that have quirky gimmicks and weird stories and that like are about like let's explore the human condition a little bit more and that isn't going to be focused on combat and stuff like that. They don't always land, but they're interesting, and I like that people are out there making games like this that are trying to push the boundaries of like what a video game is and what you're doing while you're playing and what you're supposed to be thinking and feeling and all that stuff, you know? So this is one I could see either being like a cutesy, quirky kind of thing, or like maybe it has like a deeper, like, you know, Undertale kind of energy to it as well. I'm not sure, but I want to
Yeah.
find out.
I think it's probably going to be the former, but it looks really cool. Absolutely beautiful art style. I love the fact that they've restricted themselves to 4x3. I always like it when some like movies and TV shows do that. Um, it's like an artistic choice. I think it's
Yeah.
cool. I think it looks like a really cool game.
Yeah, this is definitely one I'm keeping on my radar. And apparently, I believe I saw someone say that the Switch version of it is going to come with a copy of her original game as well, the one that I mentioned earlier. So, want to keep an eye out for. I think this is definitely one that I want to keep on my radar for sure.
Yeah. So I picked out a few others other than the ones that you found. So there's a game called Outlanders, which I think looks quite cool. And it's like a town building strategy game. And you have to some people just want to survive, some people want to create things. You have to like make sure you kind of suit their needs. You can't control them directly, but you can place things around them and manage things and stuff, and they'll decide what they want to do and where they want to live and stuff like that, which I think is quite cool. It reminded me a little bit of Black and White, where you don't actually control the people and you can't tell them what to do, but like you're like this godlike character above that manages to control every part of their life just by placing things around them and doing things, which I thought was really cool. And it looks like it's quite a nice art style, and it looks like it's got a cool soundtrack to go with it. Due out in Q1 of 2023. Looks like it could be quite a chill one with then also some deeper gameplay as well if you really get into the strategy of stuff.
Sorry, this is a bit of a tangent. Did you ever do the video on playing like lost games? Because I remember you were going to do that with Black and White, weren't you?
Oh yeah, no, I haven't yet.
Chop, buddy. I want to play. Let's go. This looks good though. I like this kind of game a lot. I like it. You brought up Black and White. It also kind of reminds me of like maybe like a Tropico, or like something like that, where
yeah.
or like I guess even like Sim City, right? Where like it is like you're controlling the environment.
You're not controlling the characters. Yeah, it's the environment you're controlling. Yeah.
Yeah, I like a good God game. I think those games can be really fun. And there's like a lot of opportunity for like, I mean, like I don't know like what the depth is going to be here with that, but I like when those games like give you opportunities for like role playing, and it's like Black and White. It's like, do I want to be a benevolent god or do I want to be evil, right? Or like, if I'm Tropico, do I want to be do I want to have my island be like a tourist attraction, or do I want to exploit all of our natural resources and make it, an industrial power, things like that. I think there's a lot of fun to be had there, and it's like very much a different way to kind of like do some role playing, which that's one of the fun things, right? That's the backbone of video games. All right, so next up, you got a game called Pixelshire. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so I briefly spoke about this earlier on. This is very much a Stardew Valley inspired game.
Gotcha.
To the point where I think you could maybe consider it a clone. But I'm interested in checking it out and exploring it, and like I loved Stardew Valley anyway. And if there's another game that's very much like Stardew Valley where I can build out a town instead of just a farm, then I'm all for it. I'm very much interested in checking it out. And like you have similar things that you would do in Stardew Valley with like trading, farming, mining, wood cutting, fishing, cooking, brewing, all of that stuff.
It feels more akin to Animal Crossing with the fact that you
Animal Crossing with a Stardew style, I think.
Yeah, because like you can there's like terraforming options, and like you can like build out your homestead and everything. It feels like, yeah, like I can definitely see the marriage of those two. Like the things about those games that are unique seem to both be here, because there's even like you can build NPCs homes and like make sure that like you're matching. That's like feels like Happy Home Designer. There seems to be like a supernatural element in the story, which like feels like akin to Stardew. Yeah, it definitely seems like it's wearing its influences on its sleeves there.
Mm-hmm.
Not that that's bad. That's that's often a great way to get a good game.
Yeah. But the art style's very, very similar indeed. Especially if you look at, say, the mine, like even the rocks look the same, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, I think this looks good. Of all of the games of this style that we've seen in recent memory, this is the first one I'm like, oh, I might play that. That actually looks good.
That and Witchbrook. Like, when is Witchbrook coming out? I'm so excited to play that. I've been excited to play that forever.
And
I need a wizard game that's not toxic, that I can enjoy, and it's like a beautiful pixel style. Be great.
Yeah, and the what's the haunted chocolatier one too?
Haunted chocolatier, yeah. I mean, I'm fine. He can take as long as he wants to make his next game. I mean, it's not like he needs the money, so.
No, that's probably true. Okay, so then the last one you wanted to highlight was a game called Espresso Tycoon.
Yes, yeah. So I love coffee. I love tycoon games. And I think one of my dreams in life has always been to open like a coffee shop or a bakery or something like that. Maybe at some point in my life I will, and later in life. and I just love and I wanted to highlight specifically, Pete, because I know we both played Coffee Talk and loved it. One of the things we absolutely both despised in that game was the latte art functionality.
Yeah.
And I want to highlight the fact that there is a good latte art designer in this, and you can like pick the patterns that you want based on market research and what people like, and you can like put that on your drinks and then sell the drinks with that specific latte art.
I'm looking at the market research, and I like how it's like, oh, like this appeals to old people, this appeals to hipsters, this appeals to kids, and yeah, seniors, tech people, whatever. This looks cool.
So I thought it was really cool. You get to like build out your whole cafe. There's like tons of different styles that you can do. You can have like cats around if you want to, like animals and pets and stuff.
This is a lot.
You can choose what drinks you want.
This is a lot deeper and more interesting than I thought it was going to be before I clicked on this trailer.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
It does.
I'm interested to check it out. It looks really cool.
This seems like this would be
similar in style.
This seems like this would genuinely be a gas. Yeah.
So I'm gonna check this one out. They also have Espresso Tycoon Prologue Underwater, which is a free game you can get at the moment. It's an underwater mission from Espresso Tycoon, and you run an underwater cafe like under the ocean, and it's like a level from that you can try.
That I don't like.
As well as the demo. So there's the demo and there's also that. But that got very positive reviews. It came out in November. 528 reviews with like a very positive spin on it. So
that's cool.
Yeah, looking forward to checking out Espresso Tycoon.
That bit scares me a little bit, if I'm honest. I used to want that. Like I used to like the idea of, oh, it would be so cool to like be in a restaurant that's underwater or whatever. But now like I'm actually terrified by that idea. Like Sarah showed me this video. It was like it was like a horror TikTok, and it created entirely a new fear for me, which is I'm not uncomfortable with water, right? Like the open ocean has never bothered me. Like my father was a sailor. I've spent a lot of time on the open ocean. Mm-hmm. But it was this video where it was like a camera and it was like above the water, and it kept like the wave would just come up and you could like see this fucking scary monster underneath the water. And I'm like, oh, now I'm terrified of that. Like that's a thing that.
Yeah. So imagine this is underneath the Loch Ness, you're screwed.
That sounds bad. Well, Nessie's friendly though, right? Like I don't think she's going to do anything.
Okay, well, it's full of sharks then. There you go.
Ugh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, sharks scare me less than jellyfish scare me. I have an irrational fear of jellyfish.
You know what's the thing that honestly scares me the most is anglerfish. And like I don't really think they can do that much to hurt me, right? Like they like eat little things.
Stingrays? Stingrays got the dude, right? Steve Irwin.
Don't even joke about that, Like that's still
terrible.
It bothers me. Because I liked stingrays, Like I was at an aquarium recently, touching the stingrays, and I'm like, the stingrays are cool. They're a cool animal. But I got a bit of a, it's like a little, because I want to let it go because I know Steve wouldn't want us to hate the stingrays, right? That was not his goal in life, was to teach us about animals. But like I got a little bit of a feud with them. They're not my favorite animal anymore, if I'm honest with you. But anyway, Espresso Tycoon, looking pretty good. So here's my challenge to you, Steve. I want you to go download all the games you said you want to play. I'll download some of the games I said I want to play because I had a slightly longer list. Let's try and play, and we'll come back next week with some light reviews. How do we feel about that?
Yeah, sounds good.
Obviously, barring...
We'll see if we can get Max to play some as well, and he can report back as well, because I'm sure he has some different ones. I think we can prize him away from Metroid for 5
Right,
minutes.
That's true. He's probably knee deep in that today. He's like, yeah, guys, I'm not feeling good. I'm gonna miss the recordings today, and I'm like, yeah, you're not feeling good. Or are you playing Metroid Prime? Let's be real, huh? Come on. Just saying. No shade. Just be honest with us, Max. But yeah, barring major news next week that monopolizes the show, that'll be the game plan. So. If there's any other games you'd like us to play and come with thoughts about them, games that maybe you got on your radar that we didn't talk about here that you think we would like, definitely make sure you write in and let us know. Couple ways you can do that. questions@flipscreen.games. Come join the Discord. Jump in the Steam Deck podcast chat thread. Bunch of ways that you can get in touch and let us know your thoughts, what games you're looking forward to, and what games you think should be on our radar as well. However you choose to reach out, we'd love to hear from you for next week's show. So, again, flipscreen.games. That's where you can find all the links. You can become a Patreon supporter. You can find our sister shows. We got a lot of good content out there for you these days. We just did an episode all about the latest Nintendo Direct. So if you're a handheld nerd like us and you want to go listen to our reactions to that news, make sure to go check out that as well. So, for the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll catch you next week for another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. Keep on gaming, baby.